help if I record this locally in case the connection goes wonky. So yes, welcome to Creator Mouse 2019, day number 6, making a beanie hat. So let's, so yesterday we did do a double-sided rosette, and we will be coming back to this later to make something some might consider risque, a little risque. We'll be coming back to that later on, but that's what we made yesterday, double-sided rosette, so it has a different texture on the outside. Whoops. Where's the oh, we joined them together. Okay, so we can't do that. So it has two materials because it's two meshes. One is flipped inside out and the other one is outside in. Did we join it in that one? Let's have a look. Yeah, we joined it on that one as well. And that one, how far back do I have to go? 3, 2. Oh, there we go. So, yes, matches the undies. Yep. So we created this yesterday by essentially creating a main mesh, and then we duplicated it and flipped it inside out, and then added a separate material to that so that we could have two textures, one on the outside, one on the inside. And aside from that sort of artistic impression he creates, it doesn't actually add anything in terms of resources to IMVU, because that is essentially what double-sided, when we have two-sided activated, that is essentially what IMVU is doing. It's creating an inside and an outside version of the mesh. So for things like this, we might as well take advantage of that and texture them differently. So we have two meshes that are joined together with a material on each one. So let's make our bow. So we're going to start from a new file, and we start from the cube as always. Edit mode, select faces. Oh, and I've forgotten to use the thingamajiggery again. Right, so edit mode, we want face select. Just select 3 of these, get rid of them. So mesh, delete, faces, and that gives us this C shape. Select all. Let's do this first. Do this a slightly different way. So hold Control down and snap, and that puts the center or the pivot point at what will be the center of the ribbon as opposed to the center of the object. Edge, drag that down, add a loop cut. Remember, horizontal edges it'll cut vertically, vertical edges it'll cut horizontally. Just want that one for now. And again, we have to toggle, disable or deactivate the tool by selecting either another tool or one of the widgets. Then we can just do some, right, so we want to keep that shape. So that's a very basic ribbon shape. So now add a couple more loop cuts, one there and one across this front. That's all we need. Select these two, so shift click, and then we can create our ribbon shape or something that's more ribbony. Vertex, so we've got a ribbon-y shape. It's not too difficult to sort out. It can be done quite quickly. We can narrow it at the front, so we want to go to scale, and again remember that if we want to scale uniformly, we click in anything or inside the white loop, but if we want to scale on an axis, we select the axes markers. That's the red, green and blue one. So there, in a few simple moves, we've got a ribbon or a piece of fabric. So we can UV map this now. First, we have to assign a material. So exit edit mode, object mode, material properties. This will have the default material assigned to it, which is associated with the cube anyway. Click and rename that ribbon square bracket 0 close square brackets. That's our IMVU compatible material name. We now need to associate a texture with this. So for that, we're going to shading workspace. That gives us a preview of our object and our basic material node or nodes. And as we're doing something very simple, all we need to do is click the add menu, add texture, and then image texture. Texture, image texture. That drops in this node. Click to drop it in place, open. And now we find the image. Let's go with the red one that we created yesterday. So there's the red one. Select. So that's got that in there. Click, drag color to base color. And that should, and it does, because the object also has a very basic UV map. So that is something we now have to update. So that's our very basic material. We don't need anything more complicated than that. So UV editing, 3D view on the left, on the right rather, UV image editor on the left. We want to switch this to material preview so we can see select all. That is the default UV map, which is yuck for what we need. So from the UV menu, UV unwrap. We can kind of see what it's doing already. So we need to adjust these vertexes and have them all running along the outside edge. So click on our element selections. So we've got vertex, edges, faces, and then islands, which an island is this entire UV. Whoops. A face is obviously just a face. An edge is just a single edge. And then the vertex are these points, these little dots. So we want to be in vertex mode, and we can switch to the transform widget, which is a sort of a universal manipulation widget, but that has the advantage of giving us the actual widgets. In the actual, if the actual widget for the actual transform mode that we actually want to be in actually is activated, so if we are so that's move, rotate and scale, we don't get a widget. So it doesn't matter what you click or what mode you're in, we don't get a widget so that we can see what we're doing. That only appears in the universal mode, and we'll get a widget depending on what type of element it is that we are selecting. So if we're selecting an individual vertex, we get the horizontal vertical axis manipulator. Selecting more, and we get the universal. So we just want individual vertexes, and all we're doing is grabbing those, and if we watch what's happening on the mesh, just grabbing those and lining them up to the edge. Got a little bit of distortion there, so I need to check that. That looks okay. That looks okay. So there is the UV map. So we can go back to layout, switch to material preview. So those are our display modes. We want to assign smoothing to this because we've got some facets. Each face is treated as though it's being lit as an individual element. We want to change that. So if we go into Object and then Shade Smooth, that changes the way the lighting appears across the mesh. Shade Smooth, and it makes everything look uniform. That's a little shiny, so material properties. We want specular, just disable that or lower the value, and it just gets rid of that shininess. Save the file. File, save as. Create all mass 2019. 6. and then 1. Save as. Right, so we can duplicate this. Duplicate objects. We just want a straight duplication. Press escape. That just resets the object back to its original position. And then we can use the rotate and just rotate this around a fixed axis, holding control to snap to the grid. And if we look top left, it shows or indicates the value of the rotation. We can mirror this, but the problem with mirroring is it tends to invert the mesh, so we have to address that later on. This just avoids doing that. So there's our partial bow. So we now need to add a center section. We do that with adding a cube. Mesh, cube. Scale that. That'll do. And edit mode. Want to add 2 loop cuts just to give this a bit more round shape. 1, 2. So that's selecting the leading edges, the horizontal edges. Switch to edge select. And select 2 edges either side of the object. Scale. And then just move them out. Do the same thing on the other side. And that just makes the object look a little rounder. Top faces. We want to universally scale these inwards, so click drag inside the white loop. That'll do. The top vertex, just pull that up to make that top bit less flat. So what we can do now, position the ribbon bits relative to that top section. Move those out to one side a little bit. Then we can adjust that a bit more so that these 2 edges, these corners, need to be inside these edges. So select, shift select, and scale inwards, and it'll be the same on the bottom as well, just to double check. That's okay, but their position needs to be changed so they're inside. And we also want to position them as close to the edge as possible, so they do intersect, but only by a small amount. And this helps later on with vertex painting, if that is going to be used. Same with that. And with that. Do the same on the other side. Edit mode. And the bottom. Perfect. So we need to UV map the center knot. We don't need that bottom face, so get rid of that first. Edit mode, faces, shift click, and then mesh, delete. So that's got rid of that. Now we can UV map this. Select all, switch to UV editing. That's the default map. UV unwrap. Oh, we've forgotten to do something. I always forget to do this. Back into object mode. Because we squashed the shape, changes the way that Blender treats the object when you do UV maps. So the UV map for this object at the moment has this, has the top of this, just this tiny shape. Because it's using the original, I'm not quite sure how it calculates it, but because you change the shape of the object relative to its original dimensions, it changes the scaling behavior and the way that Blender sees it. So when you unwrap something, it doesn't unwrap the way that you might expect it to. So to fix that, object mode, object menu, and we want apply location and scale. And what this does, so if we look at the scale values in transform, so down here, we can see that they're all different. Well, not all of them. There's it's twice as wide as it is high. We want those all to be equal. So if you watch those whilst using this, object, apply, transforms, rotate and scale, and it resets everything to 1. So if we UV map this again, select all, so that's our original map. Do this again, and it readjusts the map to better suit the shape of the object. So we've got a UV map. We want to associate the material with this, so material properties, use the browse button because we've already got a material, and we can assign that, and our image will appear. Ooh, so we have to do that UV map again just to get it to do the, there we go. Select, that's the island. And we can position this relative to, let's make it on the star. There we go. Let's make that a little bit bigger in the middle. So what we do is select these edges. Are we selecting them all? I think so. Scale. Click drag. Make them slightly larger. Rotate. That's got a bit dark on that side. Why has it done that? I wonder. Vertex. And we can get away with doing this on this type of shape because there's nothing particularly important being represented on the texture on these edge components. So we can stretch that a little bit. Like this. And that is our middle bit mapped. Object mode, object, shade smooth. There we go. So there is our very simple bow. Layout. So without all the chatting and the explanation, although that's taken about 20 minutes, without all the chatting and the explanation, you'd probably be able to do that in about 10 minutes. So save that. Save as number 2. So now what we want to do is bring this into the accessory file. Now there are two ways of doing it looks like the connection's not doing terribly well, but this is being recorded live, so the YouTube will go up later on once we're done. So there are two ways of doing this. If you were making hair and you wanted to have the avatar wearing a beanie or a hat of any kind, you could design the hat to go with the hair as an accessory, or you could include the hat with the hair so that you design the hair, how the hairstyle deforms around the hat. But a universal product is just to do the hat as an accessory and do it in a way as if it's just covering the entire hair and it's just sat on the head. Because you can't accommodate there must be thousands of different hairstyles in the catalogue now. You can't accommodate the thousands of different styles and variations and expect any hat to work, because the hats aren't made by the same creators as the hair creators. So you have to make a decision to make your hat as a hairpiece that includes hair, or just as an accessory that will just basically require the person to remove the hair, or the hat will disappear in the hair depending on the design of the hair. So before we do that, what we need to do is join these together to form a single mesh. So select them all, shift click, object, join. We can rename this, double click the name in the outliner or in object properties. So double click, just call this ribbon dot mesh. Just save that so we've got a version 3. Right, so we need the accessory file. So drag and drop that into IMVU, into Blender, or File, Open, and then browse to wherever the file is. So drag and drop, Open. So that's the accessory file. And what we're going to do first is append or import the bow that we just made. So file, append, oh, pardon me. We got to find it. Which one is it? It's that one. Yeah, so select the file, in this mode, appending, Blender files act as a zip archive. So you're actually drilling down into the contents of the folder. You want objects, double click. There is our ribbon, so append. And it has appended. It's shown in the outliner, although it doesn't appear in the scene because it's super tiny because of the scale difference between IMVU and Blender. But we can check the object is in the scene by view, frame selected. And there is our bow. It's tiny. So let's make this a bit bigger so that we can see it. Scale. Just make it big. Right, so we know it's there. Let's save this file. File, save as. Where are we? Create a mess. 623, that one 624. So let's make a beanie to cover the avatar's head. And for the female one, we'll kind of assume that there's some hair stuffed underneath the beanie. So there are a couple of ways we can do this. The simplest is just to start from a cube object. So add mesh cube, and that will add. Where is that added itself? Oh, it's down at the bottom. How big is it? It's tiny. So scale that out as well. And move that into position. So again, a simple way to do hats and helmets, hats, is to turn the box into a helmet. So we'll get rid of this front face and this bottom face because we don't need them. Mesh, delete. So that's what we have. That's our starting point. So now, here comes the fun bit. What we've got to do is add loop cuts to this object and shape it so that it matches the head, or matches the outcome that we're trying to get. So we're going to add some loop cuts. Always start off with just very simple cuts first so that you're always in control of what you're doing. So we just want a simple, come on, subdivision of the box. So what we've done is we've split it or subdivided it on all axes, and that gives us much greater control over what we now do. And this is all we need to do, essentially, is use these basic shapes as our starting point. Whoops, what's gone wrong there? Undo, undo, undo. Oh, that's why. And then it's just a question of switching between the different mode selections and shaping our mesh. Cover the ears. So what we want to do is describe a border that follows that sort of line. So we're covering the ears of the avatar, dropping around the back and going back up. And we just keep the shape very simple. So we want a face across the front there, because we need to close this gap. So we need a face that goes across here and closes this gap. So the way that we do that is edge select. Select the edges on either side of the gap. And from the face menu, is it? Never know which one it is. Where have they put that? Oh, it's there. See, that should be, because what we're doing is creating a face across here. We're going to create a face, a new face across there like that. So you would think that that would be in face. We've got inset, poke face, we've got all sorts of different face things that we can do in the facey face things in the face menu, but it's actually in vertex. So we want new edge face from vertices. That's logic for you, I guess. I'm going to split that. That's all we need to do. That gives us some control over the front. And then what we can do is join these two points together, or merge them. So vertex, select, shift select, then we're going to join those, merge vertices. Let's do at center. That joins them together, so now we can manipulate those. So as you can see, we've got a very basic shape that we can now add a bit more structure to. To match the head. So let's save this, save as. Five. Oh, how's the video? I guess refresh. Try refreshing first. The connection's been pretty bad for the past couple of days. I'm not quite sure why. It was okay the first 2 or 3 that we did, but it's gone potty since. but I am recording the streams, so the streams are being recorded and they are uploaded without any issue to YouTube afterwards. But of course, you know, you're watching it live now, so. So that's our basic shape. So now all we need to do is add some structure to this by adding a few more loop cuts. In fact, what we can do there is do something very different. So we want to I wonder. No, let's stick with just using. So loop cut and a loop cut. And again, just keep it simple for now. So that's the avatar's ear. So what we're kind of doing with the bottom set of vertexes is just getting those as close to the avatar's skin as we can, which is where the hat sits against the skin. And what we can do to augment using the widget. So with the widget, we've got very strict pathways that we can use. So what we can do to help change the position of selected elements, but not necessarily along a strict path, what we can do is double tap the G key once something is selected, and what that does is it slides the vertex along a neighboring edge. Not sure that we have a tool for that. Or is there a button? Yeah, there it is, edge slide. Oh, vertex slide. There we go. The tools aren't always as intuitive as we might want them to be. So what we're trying to do is just shift the vertexes around so that they start to okay, good. Yeah, I don't know what I don't know what's causing the connection to go all funny. It was okay the first couple of streams that we did, but Twitch is Twitch, I guess. No, it won't be you causing it, Polly. No. Oh, could always use invoke one's mod privileges and boot you from the chat and see what that does. Probably nothing. Alright, so what we want to do, add a bit more detail, a bit more structure to the underside of this, so we can use this vertex that's here and we can trace a line around to the vertex that's on the opposite side. So there's this one here and there's this one here. So a quick way of doing that is to select edges, up to, so we want, it's these vertexes that we want to use as the termination points. We want the cut to go across those edges. So we select them, and then from the where is it? Oh, subdivide, there we go. And that adds, it splits the edges and adds a loop for us. So we've now got a bit more structure we can play with. So it might be easier, rather than constantly using the widget handles, what you can do is, once you've got your elements selected, just use the shortcuts. So, whoops, pressing the G key puts us into free manipulation or free translation mode. That allows us to just grab things and just quickly move them into place. So we're starting to get there. So let's take a look. So we've got a bit of, because we split that edge, because we split that and created that loop around the mesh, what we've created here is an n-gon. So there are actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 edges to that. And what that's done, or what that does, is it can sometimes cause the surface to collapse in on itself. So what we actually want is, instead of what's happening here, where the edge has collapsed in on itself, we actually want an edge across here. And we have to do that, well, we can do it one of two ways actually. So let's try, we'll do it one way on one side and another way on the other side. So a quick way to fix this is using the knife tool, whatever that's gone. Loop cut, no, it's not that one. Oh, there it is, it's the knife tool. So that's a knife tool that doesn't have an icon that looks like a knife, but there you go. Knife tool, click on that. And to use this, all we do is click on the vertex that we want to start the cut from, and then we get this line traced out, and that'll automatically snap to the vertex that we want it to, whoops, cut across to. Have to, hang on, have to just rotate around a little bit so it's not snapping to a vertex behind us, what we're looking at. So knife tool, cut, snap, click, and then enter to confirm, and that straightens out that edge. That's what we want. Or the alternative way to do it, because it's done, well, it's not quite collapsed. It's not collapsed in on itself, but there should be an edge across that. So the other way to do it, face select, and where is this? Triangulate faces, that's the one. So face, triangulate faces. That splits the shape into its component elements, which are triangles. Select these two, face, twist to quads. So we turn that back into a face. So what we can do now is add another loop cut. We'll do that around the top there. Just the one. And that gives us the structure we need to, whoops, do the back. No, that should be quite big, so if we've got or if the avatar has, if we're doing this so the avatar appears to have a lot of hair underneath the beanie, we just need to use the underlying structure of the avatar helper to just help us shape the mesh. And unfortunately, there isn't a quick way to do this. So it's always just a matter of a bit of patience and just shaping the mesh. Typically just selecting individual vertexes. Well, it doesn't have to be symmetrical either. Right, so what we want is another loop cut that follows that path, and that gives us a bit more space to create a curvature, but thanks for dropping by, Polly. It's appreciated. So we add 2 more cuts. And use those to make the shape a little bit more round. So we need another cut across the back here because we want an edge loop across there. So select those edges. Where's it gone? Oh, subdivide. Double click, double tap. Knife. That's looking a little bit too much like a crash helmet. But we've got to follow the basic contours of the avatar. So that's where the ear is. That's the top of the head. Let's pull that in behind the ear. That's a bit high at the back, so let's drop that down a little bit. I wonder. So what we could do with edge, that one, that one, that one, and that one. Split. Oh cripes, we've been going on for over an hour. So what we may have to do is just get a texture on this. And add the ribbon. So the side and the back's looking okay, the front's a bit iffy. I think we'll pull this down below the Got to watch out for clipping through the head though. So we've got to avoid that. So we've got to make sure that the vertexes, or the vertices, follow the basic shape of the head, but give us enough room to create the shapes that we want. I wonder if that's the ear. So what we can also take advantage of, so in this section, that's a quad, but because of the orientation of the edge, it collapses as that at the edge that we can't see but is part of this quad. Because of its orientation, it's making that face, you can just about see it if we orient, it's making that face collapse in on itself as it travels along the diagonal. So in these instances, what we can do, and I'll just do this so that we can see what's going on. Select the face, convert it to triangles, and this may automatically just fix that. And what it should do, yeah, so it reorientates the edge, because what we were looking at before, so if we select that edge, that's the diagonal of the quad. So that's our quad. So if that is rotated, so if we rotate the edge so that it changes the diagonal, so from this corner to this corner, that's one diagonal. From this corner to this corner, that's the other diagonal of what was a quadratic face. So we can change the orientation of edges. So if we select that and rotate it, the face collapses on itself. Edge, rotate, but there it doesn't. It becomes more of a convex shape, and that's what we want. But when you are manipulating shapes like this is something that you have to watch out for, is the way that quads or surfaces collapse on themselves depending on how neighbouring surfaces are shaping the relationship between all the surfaces that are around it. So that's something to keep an eye on. And although that one is okay, I'm going to split it and force it so to make sure that it is facing right. It is okay, that's fine. So turn that back into a quad. because that just makes editing easier. Not happy with the front of that, but I think we'll leave it at that for now because we're running out of time. So save this, exit object mode, edit mode, save this, save as 5, 6. So we want a material for this. Material properties. There are no materials assigned to this, so we have to create one. So new. That creates a material. Rename this Beanie. And this will be square brackets 1, close square brackets, because we still have the bow sitting at the bottom of the file or the scene. So that's Beanie. So we need to finish the shading. And assign texture, image texture as we did before, but we haven't got an actual image for this yet. So what we can do is use a temporary image. So click the new button. Give this a Beanie name, and our max texture is 512 by 256, but that's an odd shape, so let's just go with 256 by 256. Don't need alpha, generated type, UV grid, and then OK. Join the two together, and there is our initial assignment. So we need to UV map this, or correct the UV map. So UV mapping, scale out, switch to material preview, select all. Now we have Beanie. So that's the default map that was originally assigned. So we want to adjust that. So UV unwrap, and that redoes the UV, which we can adjust to fit the space better. View, frame selected. That looks okay. Back into layout. What we want to do is get rid of the facets that are on this. That's these hard lines that we can see all over the place. Get rid of those. So select the object, object mode, shade smooth, and there we have our Beanie. Let's just tweak that front a little bit. Don't necessarily need it to be symmetrical. I think that's probably the thing that whoops. And if you want, I suppose you could compensate for the eyebrows as well. So that would mean just pulling the structure out a little bit so that it looks as though it's actually covering the eyebrows. Right, so where do we put the bow? Exit edit mode. Let's just save this. Save as 7. So there's our bow. Whoops. Where's that gone? Undo. This looks like a helicopter. Let's put this at the back. And not quite as big as that. Oh, that's a rotate. Want scale. Rotate. Don't necessarily want it in the center or symmetrical. But we might have to make some adjustments to it. How's that look? That's a bit big. Let's try it under there. No, let's put it there. Right, so let's do a little bit of editing to the bow. Because we want to avoid the ribbons clipping into the hat. And what we can also do based on its position is play around with the impression of gravity. Let's do a quick, let's save that, save as 8. Need to throw up a quick I wonder. Yeah, I wonder. So let's copy that, copy, paste. Whoops. So just doing a quick texture. There we go, that'll do. Save as. Beanie. Export. PNG. Oh, cancel that. TGA. Export. TGA. Where's that gone? There it is. So we want to replace this default map that we've created earlier. So shading. So there's the, whoops. So we want to get rid of that. So in the image node, all we need to do is click on the file browse icon. Oh, there it is. So there's our image. So select, open, and it drops into place. That looks like Christmas wrapping. So obviously you can do something that's more sophisticated, but size is going to be limited to what's the UV map like again? Right, so that's the UV map, and if you want the texture to be unique, relatively speaking, you're kind of stuck with something that's relatively square. But if you wanted to, you could always export this as a texture map, which would then allow you to paint something that was unique. Maybe paint a fringe or something using the, I don't know if this is actually that section of the UV map, I think it is. So you would paint a fringe around there, and that would be your detailing around that section of the mesh. But for now, let's just export this and do an export test. So save as 9. So to set this up for an accessory which is linked to the head, we join the two meshes together. So shift click, select, object, join. So we've now got one mesh with two materials, and they're numerically named or numerically identified. Edit mode, select all. Whoops, select all. Object data properties. Create a vertex group. Click the plus button. Double click, and this is called attachment root. And assign and then check the assignment. We need everything associated with that vertex group. So select, deselect, and that will test whether it's selecting everything that's associated with that vertex group. That's why that's shiny. There we go. And then next, yeah, so this is an accessory. Yeah, so exit edit mode. We need to assign a modifier. It's called an armature. And for that, we want this associated with the head. So let's just hide that for now. So that's the, where's the head bone gone? Oh, there it is. So that's the head bone. So this bone, or this armature, will control the mesh. So we select the mesh, click the eyedropper, and then click on the armature. And the name will appear as the object. So we now know that that controls the mesh. And just to double check, select the armature, pose mode, click the bones, and we'll toggle between the two because there are two. Press the R key, and one of these, it does control the mesh. And we want to do this just to check, A, that the armature is controlling the mesh, but also to make sure that we haven't left any stray vertices unassociated with the vertex group, because if we do that, we get some mesh stretching or deformation. So what will happen is when the mesh is deformed, when the armature is moved or manipulated, the mesh will deform. So a vertex will, it'll jump all over the place. Right, so what we can do now then, save that. Save as. And then we can export. So select None, File, Export FBX. File name's fine. Make sure selected objects is always disabled for accessory items. In geometry, apply modifiers, that's okay. Armatures, always disable add leaf bones. We don't need any animations either, so that can be disabled as well. So disable those two, and then export. So in IMVU, derive new product, female accessory, that's the default, the glasses. So to import our FBX, so FBX import, load FBX. What did we call it? There it is, Creative Mouse 2019 6.10. So open. We'll get the select skeleton root dialog and always select the option for root node that starts with root node. That will always be 2 bones 1 mesh. So that'll give us our cube. We forgot to rename that, that's okay. Configure. Brought in our materials. So 0 and 1. And for female accessories, the ID is always 2. Change the scale 0.01, and then just import changes, and then apply. And there is our beanie, scarfy, something or other. And it covers the default hair nicely, so that's fine. But if you wanted to, I don't know how you could do it with this. No, you can't do it with accessories. You'd have to use a body part mesh, I guess, so to override the hair, so that when someone put the accessory on, it makes the hair disappear. So there is a very simple, although it's quite time consuming to shape the mesh, rather deformed large beanie because someone's got their hair tucked inside there. We don't have any vertex painting, so we can deselect all of those. Oh, we need two-sided for the ribbon. Two-sided for the ribbon. There we go. And that's it. So that's a rather odd-looking large beanie with a ribbon or a bow. Save as. And then, of course, upload to the catalogue. So you take your product images and then upload. And we can see through that. So if you really want two-sided, and that'll stop us being able to see through the mesh. So the trick really for these kinds of things or these types of products is to start from very, very simple shapes. So we started with a cube, and instead of just subdividing it till the cows come home, just start with just one or two subdivisions and describe the basic shape. Then add a couple more subdivisions, describe the shape a bit more, and then add your final subdivisions so that you've got more shape to do, so that you are not trying to shove around too much structure from the get-go, which can be quite taxing and be quite confusing, because you'll find that if you have too many vertices in place from the start, you'll end up collapsing the mesh on itself. So the best thing to do is start simple and make the structure more complicated as you go, as you define the shape. And that's the easy way to do it. But it is time consuming. There isn't a quick way to do it, unfortunately. So there we have our beanie hair wrap with a bow. Add this, upload this to the catalogue. I'll publish this and then include the example files as well, the Blender files. So there we have it. That's Creator Mouse 2019 number 6. Some sort of hair wrap beanie type thing with a bow. So on that note, we shall call it quits there and see you on the next one. So thanks everyone for lurking and watching, and Polly for actually chatting. core blimey, Danger Mouse. The connection has not been particularly stable at all. Most annoying. It's a good job this was being recorded locally. So, we shall see you on the next one, which should be tomorrow. And that will be Creator Mass 2019, number 7. Right. On that note, bye for now, everyone.